Now in the previous video I went over and ran through the main features of the sewing machine itself, and in this video I'm going to cover all of the accessories that you usually get with a sewing machine. Now every sewing machine comes with its own range of accessories, and these accessories complement the sewing machine perfectly. Now they will either come in the way of an accessory box or a small bag. Now if it comes with an accessory box, all of your accessories will be able to fit in there, and they will be always easy to get hold of while you're sewing, because they usually slot onto the free arm of the sewing machine. In this case I've got the table on there, but they usually go onto the free arm and it just slides on really easily. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the accessories quickly first of all, and then I'm going to go into more detail with most of them. Okay, so first of all you will get a range of bobbins. Now you'll probably get about 4 or 5 bobbins, and the reason for that is because a sewing machine uses a top thread which goes along the top and then through the needle, and then you also need to put the same thread onto the bobbin, because the needle goes down round to the bobbin case and brings it back up and forms the loop, and that's how your stitches are formed. So you're going to need thread at the bottom of this machine and thread at the top, and that's what bobbins are used for. Now I will cover the bobbin later on in more detail in a later video. So you should get about 4 or 5 bobbins, and you will also get a range of sewing machine feet, and they will cover either how to put a button on, and a buttonhole foot, a straight stitch foot, a zigzag foot, and you know, you will be able to use these feet for certain projects. Okay, but you're going to get a range of feet as well, and probably about 4 or 5 different feet. Okay, and again later on I'm going to cover the feet in more detail in a later video. So that's the bobbins and the feet. Now you will also get sewing machine oil, which will be used to clean the sewing machine. You will probably get a tape measure as well, very important when you're sewing, because you're going to get your measurements with that. You might get a spare bulb, and also an unpicker, which is a great thing to have. Okay, now I will cover that in a bit, why they're so great. You're going to get various screwdrivers. I've got one here in the form of an Allen key as well, and a small screwdriver, because you're going to need to get into certain parts of the sewing machine to either clean it or change the light bulb. So that's why you get little screwdrivers as well. Also a set of needles. You're going to need different sewing machine needles, because it's very important that you change your needle regularly to keep your projects really nice. Okay, it's no good sewing with a blunt needle. It's always best to have nice brand new needles. So you're going to get a pack of sewing machine needles as well. And also here we have various spool holders, which will hold your spools of thread in place on the top of the machine, or holders like this where you can use larger spools of thread. Okay, but you're going to get a range of those as well. And also I got a small thread guide with my sewing machine here as well. Okay, now there is other little accessories which I will cover later on, but first of all what I'm going to do is cover the spool holders. So this here is one of the spool holders, and what I'm going to do is just bring the sewing machine over here like so, so you can see the back of the machine. So we'll just bring this over here. Okay, and the thread, when you're using thread like this, the thread will either slot on there like so. Now of course if you're using thread, what happens is the thread constantly gets pulled. Now can you see that as I'm pulling the thread here, because of course the machine runs along here as it's stitching, this was moving. So what happens is this little disc here, you just pop that on the end, and just position that on the end like so, and what that does is it prevents the thread from coming off. It's nice and secure. So that's what that is for. Now this particular holder here is one which stands up as well, so we could just slot that on there, and again it just slots on there like so, and of course you don't need one of these little holders, and it just pulls like that. Very, very easy to use. So those are the spool holders and the little discs. Now that brings us over to this type of spool holder. It's a kind of a cone shape, and what that is used for is larger cones of thread. Now threads come in 2,500 metres, 5,000 metre spools, but these are the larger spools, okay, and they can come into a 5,000 metre spool. And what happens is that you put that on there like so, and that will just sit on there like so. Now of course it's going to be quite difficult to turn the thread, as you can see, so what you would do is put that on there like so, and it will actually do the same thing. As you can see, very, very easy to use as the thread is just getting unravelled. Now I have an accessory which I have as an add-on to this sewing machine, and it's a really, really great thing, because what it does is it fits a whole load of spools in one go, and it's really easy when you need different colours. And what this does, I'll just take these off, take this off here, and this just slides onto there. Now this doesn't come with the machine, but it's an add-on, okay, and they're not expensive, and it's just an add-on for this machine. And what it does, if I just lift up this here and put one of the spools of thread on there like so, and that on there, what happens is this spool of thread will just thread through the loop here, and as you can see it's very, very easily getting threaded. Now I also need as well a little spool holder as well, a little sort of thread guide. That's right, they call it a thread guide, which just slides onto in there, and you can just thread the machine into the thread guide, so that it's just really, really easy to use. Okay, so that's just an add-on that you can buy for the machine. Okay, and like I say, I use this all of the time. It's such a great add-on. I really, really find it really, really easy. So if you can go for one of these or something similar, I thoroughly recommend it for your sewing machine. So that brings us over to how to change the bulb in a sewing machine. Now when it comes to changing the bulb on a sewing machine, some models have a halogen bulb, okay? So for instance, this model here has a halogen bulb, and you cannot touch the bulb. So what you need to do is get some tissue paper, so that you know that your hands are not going to touch the bulb at all, because for some reason if you touch the bulb they could break. Okay, they must have some sort of special film around the ice outside of the bulb or something, so it's very important that you do not touch the bulb. So what you need for this, so you need tissue paper, and of course you're going to need your spare bulb. And we have here the small Allen key, which fits on the side here. And of course I've also got a small brush as well, if there's any lint or any threads in there, or dust, which just removes that when we get inside. So first of all, you just need to undo the screw here, which is very, very easy to do. So just undo this and take the screw right out. Okay, just take that right out, like so. And this cap will just come off. Now, usually sewing machines are different, but basically they are the same sort of thing. So as you can see, you've got all the workings here, and we're just going to just undo this as well. I'm not just going to unscrew that completely. And of course, with the cloth, all you do is you pull the bulb out like so. And there you go. There's our bulb. And of course, you can get your new bulb and then just slot that back into place. It should just slot back in. Oh. There we go. That just slots back in. And of course, now we're just going to reapply this in here. So as you can see, really, really easy to do. Now this again was just an add-on part that I'm screwing in here because I can put magnifying glasses on my sewing machine. So this was just an add-on. But that's on there, and just slot, this cover should just slot on there like so, really easy. Put the screw back in, like so. And screw this completely in place. So make sure that that's nice and tight on there, and we're now going to see if this machine and the bulb switches back on. There we go. The bulb comes on, the bulb's been changed. Excellent. Well, actually I didn't change the bulb, I just put my old bulb back in, but of course I took it out and then put it back in. So of course you've got to check to see if it does work, of course. Now, what I'm going to do now is go over some accessories which will complement the sewing machine perfectly as well. And these are like little add-on pieces, bits and pieces that you can buy at the haberdashery shop that would really, really complement the machine itself. So that brings us over to my recommendation of little extras that you can buy to also complement your sewing machine. So first of all, what you're going to do is get yourself some pins. These are real essentials, okay, when you're doing sewing projects, because they're used to just attach your fabrics together while you're stitching. Okay, so they're fantastic to have. Now, I always keep my pins in an accessory box, and I've got all my pins at the top, and also at the bottom of the box I can put more accessories in here. So this is a great thing to have for my extra accessories. Now, also I have a pin cushion. Now, a pin cushion is obviously there to put our pins in and also our hand sewing needles, and we can just basically just take this wherever we go. So it's very portable. Okay, we can take it to the ironing board, we can take it over to the sewing machine. Really great thing to have. So a pin cushion, fantastic little thing to have. Now, tape measures. If you didn't get a tape measure with your sewing machine, I thoroughly recommend that you go out and get yourself 2 tape measures. And the reason for that is because I like to have a tape measure near the ironing board and also a tape measure near the sewing machine. And it's just ease of use, because when you start sewing, you'll be getting up to do some pressing at the ironing board and then sitting back down at the sewing machine, and you'll forget to take your tape measure back and forth. So it's ideal to have 2 sets. One at the ironing board where the iron is, and one near the sewing machine. And also do that for 2 little sets of scissors. Now, I always go for small embroidery scissors because they tend to be the sharpest, and they are there to cut the threads after every time that you sew a project, okay, or a certain part within a project, okay, and a certain seam. So again, for the same reason as your tape measures, 2 little embroidery scissors. And also hand sewing machine needles. Okay, you can never have enough sewing machine needles because they break or they get blunt very quickly, and I'm forever changing my sewing machine needles. So get yourself a nice selection of sewing machine needles because, like I say, you can never have enough of them. And that brings us over to hand sewing needles. Okay, now I always do hand sewing together with machine sewing. For instance, if I'm hand stitching a hem, a blind hem on a garment, I feel that I've got a lot more control over my hand stitching. So I always have a nice selection of hand stitching needles as well. And an unpicker. Now the unpicker is there because, like I said before, we always make mistakes. And if you say stitch a line of stitching into some fabric and it's not quite right, or it's not quite how you want it, you can just use an unpicker to unpick the stitches that you've just done out of the fabric, and then you can re-stitch that line back in. Okay, so an unpicker is an invaluable piece to have. And again, I have 2 of them, one near the ironing board, one near the sewing machine, and it's just ease of use really. So 2 unpickers. And they're a really cheap item to buy as well, really cheap, you know, but such a great thing to have. And finally, some tailor's chalk. Now I always use my tailor's chalk to mark the darts in the fabric, or notches, or anything like that, or the wrong sides of a fabric. You know, if you've got fabrics which look the same, or more or less the same on both sides, you can mark with a cross the wrong side of the cloth, so you know which is always the right side of the fabric that you're working with. Okay, so tailor's chalk, a great thing to have. Now those are definitely the essentials that I would buy to complement and add on to the accessories of my sewing machine. Now there are other accessories that you can get which are not really essential, like for instance the thread holder that I showed you earlier. Okay, then it's not really an essential, but it's a great complement to have. Okay, and because I've been sewing a long time, I've just amassed a lot of accessories over the years. So this is not really an essential thing, but again, it's a great thing that you might buy as a complement for your sewing machine. Now, if you do decide to start sewing, okay, you're going to need an ironing board and an iron as well, okay, and I recommend a steam generated iron, so an iron with a water reservoir attached to the side, okay, so it produces this burst of steam. Okay, so those 2 things are also essentials alongside the sewing machine: a nice wide ironing board and a nice steam iron. Now that brings us over to the end of this video, where I've talked about all of the accessories that come with the sewing machine, and also accessories which I think that you should buy as add-ons which will also complement the sewing machine. So I hope this has been of value to you, and it's enlightened you to the accessories which come with the sewing machine.